Gail, you are muted. Chair, you are muted.
Good morning. So we're just working on adjusting the echo. I suspect we're good now. So I'm going to call today's meeting to order at 12:01 p.m. And it is July 11th, 2023. So I'm going to begin with the land acknowledgement by recognizing that Ottawa is located on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Host Nation. The peoples of the Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The Ottawa Police Services Board honors these peoples and the land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. Today, Ottawa is home to approximately 40,000 First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Ottawa's Indigenous community is diverse, representing many nations, languages, and cultures. The Ottawa Police Services Board honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people and their valuable past and present contributions to this community. Just to remind everybody, if the echo didn't do that already at the outset of the meeting, that we are broadcasting on Zoom and live streaming on YouTube. And because we are holding this meeting electronically, I just want to remind everyone that there is a possibility of technical difficulties. And should there be any disruptions, we're just going to ask everybody to remain patient and as we work to fix the issue and resume the meeting as soon as possible. Our first order of business today is the election of a committee chair. And at this time, I will open the floor for nominations. Are there any nominations for committee chair? I don't see the gallery.
I do have my hand up, and I would like to nominate yourself, Chair Beck, to be chair of this Finance and Audit Committee.
Thank you, Member Carr. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, I'll take the, I'll seek a motion to close nominations.
I'll close. I'll move that.
Thank you very much, Member Curry. Thank you to all of you for electing me as chair, and I'll now proceed with the confirmation of the agenda. And so the motion that needs to be passed is that the Ottawa Police Services Board's Finance and Audit Committee confirm the agenda as sent to you all on the 11th of July, 2023. Is the agenda confirmed?
Confirmed.
Confirmed.
Thank you. And the second item is to confirm minutes for a meeting that I did not attend, but this is the confirming the minutes of the Ottawa Police Services Board's Finance and Audit Committee, confirmed minutes number 20 of the 9th of March, 2023 meeting. Are the minutes confirmed?
Confirmed.
Confirmed.
Are there any declarations of interest at this meeting? Seeing none, move on. We have one item of business today, and that is that an outline of the 2024 draft budget process and timelines. And Chief, I understand that you and your staff have a presentation, so I'll turn this item over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Krista, are you going to be putting that presentation on the screen to share?
It'll actually be Mike Anderson.
Mike Anderson, there we go. Okay. So thank you very much, and members of the Finance Committee. Thank you for having us here today. Our team is here to provide you with an update on the status of our 2024 budget planning activities and to provide a line of sight on some of our preliminary projections and anticipated initiatives for 2024. This, of course, will be one of several opportunities for members of the board to be informed on the status of the 2024 budget and to provide input to us in terms of constructing it. Other opportunities will be outlined momentarily by Deputy Chief Bell. To that end, I will turn things over to Deputy Chief Bell to discuss our budget build process and consultation approach. Steve.
Thanks, Chief. And thanks to members of the board, to Krista for organizing all of these meetings. FAC is a valuable, very valuable portion of our budget build, and I'll thank you for coming together so early to actually start this. So what you see in front of you is a timetable that we'll be adhering to build the budget this year. We've already started internally, and in June we had a budget kickoff where we're actually looking at operational initiatives, some of the key themes and priorities we want to focus on through the next year. The next major milestone for the board will be in September, when we'll be looking to receive a budget's direction report. That usually coincides in timing with the city's direction report. The board isn't bound by the city direction, but usually in past years has tried to stay in line with what the city was seeking for a budget increase. We'll be coming back to FAC at a couple different points over the next little while before we finally table the budget, and as well as going to special board meetings. So in November, we'll table a finalized budget, hand it over to the board, where the board's consultation process will start through a month on the budget that was tabled. Included in that will be an FAC meeting where normally delegates are present. And then ultimately we will go with the chair. We will support the chair as the budget's tabled to the council in November, ultimately coming back in December for a final debate and approval. So those are the timelines on how we're building the budget as we move ahead. So in terms of consultation, Mike, if you can go to the next slide. A really big portion of what we're doing is, and what we always do, is to try and get input from a variety of different sources on what people would like to see in next year's budget. What are the key areas they would like to see us placing our money towards, what efforts they want to see us undertake. So that is already underway. And I can tell you some of the key points around this are the consultation that the chief will be doing with councillors. He has a series of meetings set up to meet with all the councillors to get their ward priorities through the summer. We're also doing external consultation through survey, but also through focus groups. And what the board will see is over the period of end of August into September, you'll continually get updates on what we're hearing and what we're seeing from a consultation perspective. So that will all roll up into a package that will come to the board in conjunction with the directions report, so that you have a very good sense of what we've heard. From there, once the budget's tabled, we'll look to support the board in any way that they want, that consultation, the board consultation, can occur. Normally we do it independently on our own, talking to different groups around what is included in the budget, but also leverage some of the city budget consultation that goes on. So that'll be our consultation efforts, and you'll hear, I know you've heard a lot, and you'll hear much more about that as we move ahead. I'll now move on to where we start from a financial perspective in terms of what our projections were in this year's budget, 2023 going into 2024. And with that, I'll turn it over to John Sweet.
Thank you, Deputy, and good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. So the numbers in this table included in this slide are taken from the 2023 budget book, as the Deputy just mentioned, and are what we forecasted as our initial requirements for 2024. And last year's estimates are the usual starting point for the upcoming year's budget. Now, but most of these numbers will be refined as we move through the various milestones that were highlighted on the previous slides. To quickly touch base on the numbers presented in this table, we'll start with the first category, maintain services. Annually, this category does represent the largest pressure for the OPS. And it does include the contract settlements for both the OPA, the Ottawa Police Association, and the Senior Officers Association. It also includes costs for legislative changes to the Canada Pension Plan, and as well as a provision for our inflationary pressures. The second category on here is the growth category, and that does include a provision for 25 additional positions being added to the OPS and the associated compensation and non-compensation costs that come with those added positions. The third category is a funding provision that is set aside for new services, and we are anticipating that DEMS will be the main pressure against that provision for 2024. The fourth category of efficiencies includes a preliminary target for OPS in recognition that continuous improvement and is an ongoing exercise that we undertake and are committed to. The last category for user fees and revenues has a small revenue increase from the annual changes in our pricing schedule. So these preliminary numbers provide us with an expected pressure of $15 million for 2024, which represents a police tax increase of 3%. The last item that I did want to mention is the assessment growth estimate of 1.5%. In consultation with the city, this is the estimate recommended that all departments use for the 2024 budget, and we won't know what the exact amount is from the city until later in the fall. So I'll now turn it over to the chief for the next slide.
Thank you, Jonathan. You see on this slide a number of different initiatives and themes that we've talked about for the most part in the past, and you'll see 4 of them that are highlighted in blue. I'm not going to talk on all of them, but I will talk about those 4 in blue. Resource stabilization. Again, we've discussed this a number of times. A number of factors have placed the organization in a challenging spot from a staffing standpoint. Major events and demonstration. This has taxes our members every week, if not every day, with various activities around the city. This has driven OT and some burnout of our members. An important piece, a presumptive legislation that occurred about 7 years ago for work-acquired mental health injuries and illnesses. And I'll say is a very, very positive program for our members. But since the inception of the legislation, we have seen a significant increase of members on sick leave. The 2021 hiring freeze, where we didn't hire anybody for that time period, again, very significant impact on our organization. Increases in the number of crimes and the complexity of the crime. We've got a growing and more populous city, which has resulted in more demands from the police service, from our community. And I see those demands from the community directly requested to me over and over again. So we really have to be very aggressive to stabilize our workforce. This will start with a hiring, we hope, of an additional 25 members in 2023, and looking forward to understand what our requirements are moving forward, beginning in 2024. Another box there is the federal funding discussions. This year, we have initiated those discussions with some of our law enforcement partners that include Public Safety Canada, and we're working to develop a comprehensive plan to manage protest activity related to the federal government's presence here in Ottawa. And we were hoping that the outcomes of that work will result in some new funding and additional resources beginning in 2024. Another topic there, traffic. Residents of Ottawa, they identify traffic road safety, whether they're drivers, cyclists, or pedestrians, as a top concern year after year. And it remains a priority for OPS. I can tell you racing cars, stunting, and the noise that comes with it is a hobby for many in Ottawa. But I can tell you the impacts on those that live in those areas is impactful, and we're hearing a lot from those residents in different parts of the city. And examples like this is why the OPS Traffic Service Unit continues to take a targeted database approach to their enforcement. Where possible, work in tandem with city partners like Safer Roads Ottawa to enhance the road safety for all. But they are struggling with chronic staffing challenges, as we've had to pull people from traffic into the front line. But we are looking to alleviate some of this. We have cross-trained some frontline patrol in our neighborhood resource teams and performing some tasks that the traffic unit does. We're making investments in how data is shared, both internally and with city partners, that will provide more real-time information that'll help us direct our limited resources. And I can tell you, we will be strongly advocating for the expansion of red light and speeding cameras, improving our partnerships with the city partners responsible for this expansion. that's committed to making the staffing of traffic services a priority moving forward. So all of that we're going to try to continue with what we've started here in 23 and move that into 2024. The last area I'll talk on is the mental health call response. As we all know, police services nationwide are faced with the changing public expectations related to police responding to these calls. The calls are rising, and it increases our budget pressures. But for the last number of years, the Mental Health Call Response Initiative has aimed to find the optimum balance between community needs while maintaining alignment with our legislative responsibilities to uphold public safety and security. In recent years, this work has been done following the lead of the community-based Ottawa Guiding Council for Mental Health and Addictions. We refer to them as the Guiding Council. We fully support their research and efforts towards developing a response to low-risk calls for service, and we look forward to supporting the newly announced pilot. But certainly, regardless of the outcomes of the pilots, the OPS has work to do both internally and externally to best position and support a mental health response here in the city. And this work will continue in 2024. Back over to Deputy Bell for the next slide, please, Mike.
Thanks, Chief. So today's about getting a kickoff and the initial input from the FAC on terms of where they see our budget going, where they'd like to see our budget going, or what questions you have around them. We have a number of steps, and it all mapped out to get us to the point that we actually have a final approved budget this year. You'll continue to get updates on consultation. That's going to be extremely important for us, and we'll keep you up to date as we move along through that. From that, consultation's allowing us to draft our internal budget document that both incorporates the financial aspect of where we're going to spend our money next year, but also the policy statements that we're going to make in terms of what are the key areas we're going to focus on in next year to deliver as a police service. We'll be coming to you in September with a directions report to seek direction from the board in terms of how you would like to see our budget framed out. And we'll continue to have conversations with the board primarily through the FAC as we develop that, as we develop these reports and ultimately develop the budget. So with that, we're happy to take any questions.
Questions, members of the committee? Can't see hands, Marty. Member Carr.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much to the Chief and CAO Bell for their presentation. I have a couple questions. I'll ask a few and then go to the next person. With respect to, I think you'd forecasted, I can't remember the page, I've got it in front of me, some efficiencies that you will be looking for. You do that every year. I think it's 1 million that you had used. I was wondering, I know you look for efficiencies every year. I was wondering, in light of the fact that the city is undertaking the program and service review, and I know that the police services had earlier said that they would be looking at also undertaking that review. I'm wondering if there was any additional efforts made this year to look for perhaps greater efficiencies than you do typically each year, just in light of that activity, which the city has ongoing. That's my first question.
Okay, thank you, Member Carr. I will turn over to Deputy Bell to start the answer to that question, and then I'll come back with some comments of my own at the end. Deputy Bell.
Thanks, Chief. So efficiencies and gaining efficiencies in the Ottawa Police Service has always been a major focus for us. I can tell you in the last 10 years, we've created $21 million in inefficiencies within the organization. Most of those have been through back office reviews. My understanding is the current city's program review has a main back office component to it, focusing on fleet, facilities, as well as operational service delivery. We've done the fleet facilities reviews. We've actually created lots re-engaged and provided money back to the city in many of the back office ways. What we're going to focus on this year, and I'll turn it over to the chief to have a discussion, is we really need to focus on our operations and actually have program review on how we deliver our service. So with that, I'll turn it over to the chief.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, so to further that comment, and I can tell you just, on a personal side, after, learning quite a bit about the Ottawa Police Service in the last 7-8 months, and hearing from the community over and over again on different themes of what they want to see from us, it's clear to me that we really have to look at how we deliver policing in Ottawa. And that structural change, and we certainly have some ideas, probably some that I won't want to talk about publicly right now, because some of it is significant, but it certainly something that that we're looking, as Deputy Bell mentioned, we want to get the strategic planning completed, and we have, in terms of frontline policing, neighborhood policing, how that's delivered. Those reviews, some have started, and then we'll be very assertive in looking at some of those reviews in the fall and early winter.
Continuing Member Carr.
Thank you very much for that. This one's a quick one. You spoke about when you talked about traffic enforcement, and I will certainly say as a city councillor that I hear more about the need for traffic enforcement than almost anything else. You talked about how increasing the cameras and how that's priority. I just want to confirm, the city, the police services doesn't have any costs related to that program, nor do they get any money from those traffic cameras. Can we just clarify that for me?
Yes, certainly, Member Carr. We don't manage the program. We don't. I think. Perhaps there's some input, but they have, a program of, the school zones and, different key areas, and we are told about it and whatnot, but we are just a partner in there. And in terms of the funding, I can't confirm where the money goes, but it's, to my knowledge, it may or may get funneled into different community safety issues, but, I'm not sure about that. Something.
So Chief, I can speak to that. So what we have, a long-standing agreement with the City of Ottawa where they provide us initially 2 million, and I believe it's creeping up from the 2 million closer to 3 million around red light cameras specifically. We do not get any revenues from this community safety zone cameras, and there's been no discussion about any increase in revenue sharing with the city from the red light cameras. But we do get a stream of revenue from them on a smaller basis.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. I'll just continue a few more questions. Obviously, the South facility, I see it there as a priority. I guess my concern from a facilities point of view is that we tend to see these large infrastructure projects. They typically have a lot of cost pressures. You don't often find large facility projects that go under budget, nor do you find ones that are done within a shorter time frame than what we've planned for, such as large project management. We usually exceed budgets, exceed timeframes, and sometimes can exceed scopes. But I'm just concerned in terms of, the discussions that we've already had. We've already seen a huge escalation of the costs on the South facility just based on the fact that it was delayed several years. We've now seen that there's costs related to Queensview that will end up costing more. And I think for both of those cases so far, the Ottawa Police Services has said, you can absorb those internally without having to go back to council. I just wanted to get your perception on whether or not any of those cost increases on that facility or other facility pressures will continue to be able to be absorbed in-house.
Okay, Deputy Bell, I'll let you take that one, please.
Yeah, for sure. So definitely have been cost escalations around the delays in it. That's occurred with any large infrastructure, as you noted. What I will say though is we're moving ahead. We're coming to the board with delegated authority for a roadworks package in July. We're about to go to tender on a fixed price contract where we'll be coming to the board in September. So we are making the steps. The team is very diligently managing all of the pieces as we move ahead so that we can look at delivering this project on budget and on time. What I can tell you is our facility strategic plan has $220 million in capital in it. So we do have flexibility within that envelope if there are future pressures to south. And as we know, we saw with Queensview, that was a net new piece of information to us that forced us to change some of our direction moving ahead. And we'll continue to manage issues like that in the project as we move ahead.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I've just got a couple more questions. You talked a lot about that we're expecting the mental health response, the guiding council. It will just be a pilot for next year in one geographic location that's yet to be determined. And obviously there's a lot of work for the city and the guiding council to do with respect to that. Do you eventually expect to see any reduction in resources based on these mental health response, the alternate mental health response? Do you expect, based on your experience with other jurisdictions, looking what has been done in Toronto or elsewhere, that there will be a reduction in police service resources needed over time?
Well, thank you, Member Carr. It is a difficult question to answer in terms of the expectations, because even the Toronto pilot is relatively new. And, what was reported was, sort of initial findings over a short period of time, albeit very impressive findings. If the pilot is established and there's positive results within that pilot and it's more robust, it expands to more areas. The community service agencies that are going to be responsible for responding as they build their capacity, I expect, if it's a success, that there's less calls for service for police to respond to and mental health. Therein, we should have less calls. We have to, for it to be a success, we have to go to less mental health calls, or it's not a success. However, so there's no doubt there'll be less resources, hopefully then, dedicated to mental health calls. However, the cup that is overflowing with what we have to do and the demands from our community. For example, we talked about traffic, we talk about protests, we talk about neighborhood resources, and making sure that we're in those neighborhoods responding to the concerns and the priorities of those neighborhoods. There is so much more for us to do, be it cybercrime, be it elder scams, like the list goes on, that I would want to redeploy those resources to other demands within our service. So in terms of a reduction, that's not something that I anticipate, but certainly a redeployment, hopefully, of some that would go to mental health calls. Now, having said that, if, for example, over the course of a year, we go to 100 less calls than we normally would, that sounds significant, and it is. And I wouldn't minimize that it's 100 less calls, but it's not enough to have a significant decrease in overall resources at the service.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think that was my concern too when I looked at the latest statistics in terms of rises in hate crimes and rises in large vehicle thefts and all these other pieces. Right. It's really more of a redeployment. So I'm going to my last question, and then I'll let someone else speak. Sorry. Just in terms of redeployment of resources, I found it really interesting taking a look at the 911 system, that it's the police services that is operating that on behalf of the city, because you're triaging to paramedics, you're triaging to fire. I know you were looking at building an additional stream with respect to mental health. Does the police services incur any costs related to the work that they do on behalf of the city for 911? Or is it all done on a cost recovery basis with the city? That makes sense.
Okay, I think it does make sense, Member Carr. I am going to go to Deputy Ferguson, who looks after the comms, and let her take a crack at that one. Trish.
Thank you, Chief, and good afternoon, everyone. I can certainly speak to a little bit of the nuances about how 911 works, but I think from a cost perspective, you're probably going to want to hear from DC Bell on exactly the formula, the cost recovery. I do know that right now we're not right-sized for the amount of 911 calls that we're getting, and we're having conversations with Mr. Ayat, over at the city about looking forward to how we can improve our response time. But I will send it over to Steve in terms of the cost recovery piece for that.
Thanks, Trish. So we actually have a fixed rate cost contract with the city. They give us X number of dollars. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. X number of dollars to operate the 911 system. It hasn't in the past ever incorporated change to the call volume. And that's, as Trish talked about, we're starting to have those discussions with the city saying the 911 system 911 calls have increased over a number of years. We have to figure out the mechanism that we can not put it on the police as a tax burden to increase the number of 911 call receivers. So city's a great partner for us, continues to be a great partner, and we're just entering into those discussions right now, and hopefully we'll have news for you as we come into next year's budget.
Okay, thank you very much to all of you. I'll flip it over to another member now and put my hand back up if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Curry.
Thank you very much. Some of my questions were asked by Councillor or Member Carr, but let me start with the assumption, but maybe it's not just an assumption, of the 1.5 assessment growth number. So that number, I'm thinking, came from the city, and councillors haven't necessarily heard that yet, but we've assumed it's not going to be 2.2. But I would say, given how much less development there is, which is where that number comes from, we thought it might even be lower, so 1.5, how sure are we that that is going to be the assessment growth number?
So I don't think oh, I'm sorry, Chief.
No, it was coming your way. It was coming your way, Steve, so have at it.
What I figured, yeah. So John Sweet has incredible relationships with city, continually talks to them. We won't know what that assessment growth is until the city directions are finalized. In our preliminary discussions, that's been what has been determined to be our assessment growth. It's the same assumption we started with in the early days last year, and then it increased to 2.2%. The history of our budget says it usually falls in that anywhere from 1.4 to 1.8%, and they're pegging it right now at what they believe will be 1.5. We'll adjust ultimately when we get their directions come out to what that assessment growth will be, but we won't know until it's finalized by the city.
Okay. All right. I just kind of want to know how sure you are. If that's what they're telling you, that's what they're telling you. But I mean, we were, as councillors, I think, worried that it would be even less than 1.5. So just something to keep in mind. Maybe it will be 1.8, but we'll see. Okay. So, and sorry if I missed this in the presentation, I was taking different notes, but in any of this, I know this isn't final, but is there any assumption that we would get additional monies federally or provincially, or is there nothing built in there yet?
Member Curry, there is no confirmation of any new funding. It's simply work underway, discussions underway to try to get to that point. So we're not assuming or not budgeting. We're budgeting for no increase, and then working through the process.
Okay, super. That's fine. So the other thing I wanted to say was, in the presentation in our very last meeting, I understood the one of the challenges is, and I've spoken to a number of officers just at different events I've been at, who, not that I'm checking, but that they confirm as well that they're so looking forward to moving up to another position or in a different department or whatever, but cannot because they have to stay in their role, right? Because there aren't enough officers to backfill. We've talked about this. But when I asked about this last meeting, I understood and was shown the chart that what the need is 60 new officers each year for the next 3 years. But yet what you're telling us here is just 25. So my question is, why is the ask not for 60? If we know we have to do 60, 60, 60, and that's what we would need to solve not only the problem, that was just one problem, but just having enough for neighborhood resource teams, having enough for each of the, what do they call, platoons? And also having enough for some of the areas that we need to grow, like cybersecurity. So why are you not asking for 60?
Yeah, Member Curry, it's a good observation, and as you know, sort of my opening volley, if you will, of comments is that this is an initial sort of look at our budget process and what sort of we've been presented with, and it's going to develop over the budget time with consultation, as well as our strategic planning, and then when we present a budget, say in September to the FAC, that's one that will have more of a robust number in terms of what our ask will be.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. I would just say to you, if that's what you think you're capable of actually hiring and could do, I mean, you want to be realistic for what you think, you've got to hire, obviously find people, hire them, onboard them, all the rest of it.
Right.
I would like to see that if we do feel we actually could do a 60 each year. Okay, so that's that. And then the other is I want to look at the actual chart. So maintained services 11.7, FTE growth 3.5, new services 1. That adds up to 16.2, right? And then the efficiencies 1 and 2. So changes in fees and revenues means an increase in 0.2, because I thought that actually, because it has brackets around it, might mean like it's a reduction. You know how these things are sort of both ways, but you're basically offsetting by 0.2 because there would be an increase in fees and revenues. Am I right? Yes. Otherwise, it would be an ask for 16.2 if we didn't have the 1.2. Okay, so
Correct.
Where are the changes in fees and revenues? What is changing?
Steve and Jonathan?
Yeah, John, I'll turn that over to you.
Thanks, Member Curry. Annually, we do increase our fees by roughly 2%, consistent with the cost of living, contract settlements, et cetera. And those would go to our background check reports sold, our paid duties, a lot of those services that are sold to the public. Those will all see that same 2% increase.
Okay, perfect. And then the last thing I was going to say is obviously you've all seen, I don't know, hopefully everybody's read through the Ottawa Fatal Collision Review Committee report. And it was heavily commenting on increased traffic police and increase, yes, red light cameras and all the rest of it, but I'm just pointing out that was one of their number one recommendations, was to have more police patrolling due to and this is the first time this committee has ever done a fatal collision review committee. So my question is, did that report influence anything in this budget, or as we go through further consultations, we'll get more of that in the further consultations?
Thank you, Member Carr. So yes, similar to your first question, we're starting at a base, and then we're going to be, we don't want to presume, I mean, I've heard a lot from the community, as has my other colleagues that are present with us. And, but we are, the formal consultation that Deputy Bell outlined, my meetings with city councilors, it's going to be very robust, and we are not going to come to any conclusions based on what we've heard, but we will certainly come to some conclusions similar to that now with the traffic focus in our September ask. And I will say this, and I don't want to, we don't often talk about specific units and vacancies, but the traffic unit, has suffered greatly in terms of the vacancy as they move to the front line to help with shortages there. Having them grow would be ideal. Having our fatal collision, actually investigative unit, which is extremely busy, grow would be ideal. Getting all the vacancies filled would be the first step for sure. Right. And we do have a bit of a plan with some of these vacancies that again, after some consultations, we want to make sure we bring forward.
Great. Well, I know you'll hear that again and again from councillors, because as Councillor Carr was saying, it's something we hear over and over from our colleagues, that's the number one thing we get asked about. I had another question. I don't know, Madam Chair, did you have some questions, or do you want me to just continue? Or Councillor Carr still has her hand up. You want to just go back to Councillor Carr?
I think she's actually raised her hand again, it looked like to me, but I think if you finish and then we'll go back, that's what makes the most sense to me. At the moment, my questions have been asked.
Okay. Okay, so the other question I have is on that 911 call. So the guiding council has their recommendations out there. One of the conversations I've had with a few counselors was we need to understand better what we are already doing. One of the recommendations was an alternate number, and to have obviously that alternate number go to an alternate response. But I see where, you know, like the distress center hotline is a separate number. And then there are other numbers, kids help phone, and don't quote me on those, but I know there are a number of phone numbers, but at the end of the day, they all go to the same place, and then they get triage, you know, depending on who's going to answer. Is it not like part of when I was reading the guiding council report, I was reading it thinking, don't we already do some of this stuff? And I guess I just wanted that answered here because it affects what I might think about in terms of this budget.
Great, thank you, Member Curry. So a lot going on there in terms of some different numbers that people have opportunities to call. I am going to go to Deputy Ferguson. She's our representative on the guiding council, and I'll let her maybe massage a little bit some of the alternate numbers of what the idea is. Trish, over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the question. So there are a number of numbers. What they were looking for was to try and streamline, and the guiding council did a lot of work last summer in consulting people who from the community, a lot of racialized and underrepresented communities who really struggle with 911 as being a response for them, and they're concerned. There's some fear and some anxiety about calling 911. And I don't think there was necessarily an awareness of what other alternatives were available. And of course, in a crisis, it's often not the person themselves who's calling, but a member of the public. And so I think part of what we've determined in the review of our current response is that there is a lot of work to be done on educating the public and providing them with that additional number in a good setting. In a 911 setting, when people can't remember that number, or that's what they're used to, we want to be able to have an alternative to, if you will, off-ramp that call to where it needs to be. If it's not a safety concern that does not require a police response, and even in some cases that they don't want a paramedic response, they're not interested in seeing anybody in uniform, that we have those resources in the community available. So, it's set to launch at this point in time. Our work plan indicates July of next year. But I think, in a bit to Member Carr's question about, like, are we going to see some reduction? I believe we will probably see a need for us to maintain our staff level for a period of time until those places or pieces are really put into place, and we'll be able to support the community in the way that it requires. So we do have 211, that is, and the Ottawa Distress Center, and there's a kids help phone line. They are all different numbers. My understanding on the way a lot of them work is that they all go to separate places, and there are volunteers, there are staff. So part of what we are looking at with the guiding council is looking at what currently is out there, what services could address the asks or what they heard from the community that they wanted. And it really is about that initial response, and then the wraparound service, and then even a follow-up perhaps in 48 hours post that, along with peer support and that. So there will be an assessment of what we've got out there. Is there anybody in the community right now who can actually fill that void? Do we have any services? Can we partner up services? All of those things are going to be looked at in the initial stages for the RFP. But I think there's still a fair bit of work to be done there, but there's a lot of good work that's already going on. And so I think they're going to want to look at what's existing. So we're not really starting from scratch.
Thank you for that comment, because that was exactly what I was thinking. You think about what Ottawa Hospital is doing, and the crisis van and the paramedic response already. I mean, to me, again, I don't want to see any part of our budget here that means we are reinventing the wheel when there's already synergies. And so that is my biggest concern, that we put something into our budget that has us going in this direction. They're saying, let's start something brand new, when we're actually kind of doing the same thing, and that monies are wasted one place or another, or both. So I do want to make sure that that is understood before we go further into this budget, and that we don't see anything wasted. I think Oh, I also do want to say we need to look more at that funding for the red light camera and the school area funding. You know, it was clarified to me the other day, just to make this point, you know, people always ask us, can we not put these school zone cameras, speeding cameras everywhere, right? And the response has been, oh no, they're only supposed to be in school zones. Well, actually, that's not true. What's true is they have to be in an area that is designated to be a dangerous area or something. I don't know, Deputy Bell, you're nodding. There's language around it. It doesn't say schools only. It
A
says
community safety zone.
a community safety zone, right? So I guess I would just say there's also what might be helpful for police to say what they would also designate as community safety zones that aren't only schools, that those areas too could be revenue generating if they're really hot spots. Because from talking to some of the traffic staff, they tell me there are, and there's a lot of work that could be done there. So I just say that in terms of revenue generation, and but I understand this is the first touch point. Looking forward to other ones. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Curry. And I might just add this on the location of the cameras, speed cameras and whatnot. I know there's certainly been suggestions to me from the community of those high traffic locations where the stunting and the speeding is occurring from the car enthusiasts, that they would like to see those placed in those areas as a deterrent. And certainly that makes sense to me, because some of these areas have been used over and over. And we've been targeting them. We have a project called Project Noisemaker, which is targeting some of these areas, but we can only get to certain areas at certain times based on resourcing and whatnot. We've had some significant results and charges from it, but that consistent presence of those cameras might really help us. So thank you.
Member Carr, do you have some additional questions?
You just have one additional question. I was looking in terms of the consultation strategy for the budget. And I know when I looked at the public quiz survey that's gone out, that I was pleased to see, you know, how many different languages it was in. I will say that I'm always a little bit of trepidation about using public surveys as a tool, just because, you know, there's no guarantee on a one-on-one response. You know, certainly we see campaigns where these things are sent out widely and encouraged for input. And I just reflecting back in my previous involvement as a community member in budget consultations with city councilors, and now as a city councilor from last year, I know that when I did my budget consultation with other councilors last year, I got a lot of questions about police. Perhaps I tend to get more because I am on the police services board. But I was wondering if there's any plan to do sort of any in-person consultations or with targeted communities at all, not relying solely on surveys. If you could speak to any of that, that would be helpful for me.
Certainly, Member Carr, we do have a number of meetings one-on-one. And again, I'm personally going to meet with every councillor that wants to meet with me. That invitation has went out. We've actually had a very good response. There's maybe 4 or 5 we still have to track down and just make sure that whether they want to meet or not. We are being invited to some town halls. I know Councillor Brockington recently, it's just on the top of my head as it was this morning, that we were having discussions with him in terms of attending his town hall. And we do have a number of meetings, like our network, our deputy chiefs, our superintendents, they have their contacts and they are tasked with meeting with their individual groups and discussing budget, discussing priorities. So we get that broad base from the community, and not just, and of course the survey is just a piece of the pie. It's not, it's not, we're not relying on surveys, because for the exact reasons that you mentioned, it can tell a story, but maybe not the story. So we need more.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'll let that be my last question.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Member Curry.
I don't have a question. I just have a comment. We have an email from, I think it was John Steinbach that sent a revised hate crime data for LGBTQ2++. Was it John?
I think so, yes.
I honestly I just want to say thank you very much for following up on that and giving us better numbers. I know, as we've said before, our data isn't 100%, but very helpful. And I didn't look at it, but I hope that went out to all counselors, because counselors had commented to me too that they're looking forward to better data, because we knew that number was not accurate. It was very low in our first report. But anyway, I just wanted to say thanks for following up on that, because that is important data, and it will continue to be important data.
Thank you, Member Curry. Yeah, it is concerning, and we actually, what I was pleased with the media coverage of that was very good as well too. Numerous outlets picked up the story and reported on it. We're hearing it from a lot of the diverse groups that we mentioned in our release. They're concerned about their safety and how they're being polarized and targeted by certain groups. And we just need to be here to support them. And those numbers, again, they may go up. And we say negative with the numbers. Positive, if they do go up, that they're trusting us to actually do something. Our hate crimes unit is doing an incredible job when they get these calls for service and bringing people to a charge status if required. And hopefully those groups see that, and hopefully those that are perpetrating the crime see that we mean business in regards to investigating these acts of hate and hold them accountable. And maybe it may just convince them not to go down that path.
Great. Well, thank you for that.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I have no questions myself, so I'll just ask, is this item received for information?
Received.
Received.
Is there any other business for the committee? Seeing none, our next meeting will be held on Thursday, September 7th at 1 p.m. And I seek a motion to adjourn. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for the update, and have a good afternoon.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.